Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect and tap into other financial resources, career resources. But more importantly, athletes transitioning out of sports is such a major issue today between financial literacy, mental health, and a lot of other areas. So we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their transition out of sports into successful entrepreneurship and business leadership. And our goal is to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So excited today to have with us Jennifer LaPoint. How you doing, Jennifer?
I'm good, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. So this, I think, is my first professional water skier, a Hall of Famer too. You might actually be. I think you're my first Hall of Famer too. Well, you might have. I think I had a couple football players that might have been like Hall of Famers in their colleges.
Okay.
Professionally, you're taking it. So thank you for that. So Jennifer, growing up, she's a basketball player. Well, she did the water skiing as well, but she played basketball at Georgia Tech. And then ultimately, after 3 years playing basketball, decided that she was going to go the professional route with water skiing and really take on that journey. So she got into that. And then, she's going to share with all about that journey. Sounds exciting. A lot of how we're going to talk about how she utilized her athlete skill set and the DNA and all that to kind of accomplish what she did. And then, became a serial entrepreneur. And today she has a very exciting business that she'll share with us later called Compete. So Jennifer, I always like to talk about growing up playing sports. How did that shape you leading up into college?
Well, I'm like what they call a Title IX baby. So I'm one of the first women athletes that were given equal opportunities in university. So I was able to get a full scholarship playing women's basketball at Georgia Tech. But before that, I played sports when you could play three sports. Now one of my things that are happening in the marketplace that I think is bad is that athletes are having to choose a sport way too early. I think being able to play multiple sports in high school builds your skill and helps you find what it is that you really love to do. So I ran track, played basketball and volleyball all through school, and then my favorite thing to do in the summer was water ski. So I was really a four-sport athlete when you could do that.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's you're right. It's kind of unheard of. I mean, I know even just from now, and I did coaching with my son. Is that he started out and he played all the sports like you're talking about, but basically migrated to baseball. Played little league and travel baseball and all that. And you're right. I mean, nowadays people are so specialized, and it kind of takes away, I think, from the experiences they can have as athletes.
Yeah, so one of the we're going to talk about my app project a little bit later, but one of the problems that we're solving for is that sports across the board are declining. I mean, American football, even the majors, not just, the niche sports, but it's, what young athletes are saying is that it's too serious too soon. I can't just have fun. I have to specialize too soon. It's gotten too expensive. And frankly, I'd just rather be in my technology. So all of those are coming up as problems. But one of them is that, they're just having to choose too early, and, they're just not ready to necessarily choose. A lot of times their parents are like, okay, you're going to be, a high school, you're going to be on the track to be a university level volleyball player, when you're 8. And you haven't had a chance to see what else you might like. And it's just too intense. And then not every family has the money to go down the summer leagues, AAU journey. So that, it's just so expensive even to be a specialist. But I frankly, from the time when I think Tiger Woods is an athlete who was a specialist. And I think there's some super elite athletes that were multi-sport athletes that are, extremely talented in more than one sport, and then went on to be Hall of Famers in a particular sport. So there are two different journeys for that. But I think the more fun journey is the one where you get to try a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, we talk about transition out of sports. It's such a major issue, but from a standpoint in college, and I probably know the answer to this because it's, same as mine as well. But was there education on, what's next after sports when you were in school, or do you know today, like at Georgia Tech, if they have that?
I don't really know. And I don't remember getting any education about what you do, after the after you play sports. I don't remember them. Now, I'm sure they probably have some programs today, but I'm just not that familiar. I mean, my main takeaway for athletes is that if you've grown up and you've been playing volleyball or water skiing or whatever it is since you were 8, I mean, your identity is athlete, right? And then maybe you play high school but not college, or maybe you play college but not pro. Maybe you play pro and they age out, and then you're really left with this emotional hole of like, this is my identity as this person.
Right.
What do I fill it up with? And there are a lot of ways that people can be involved in a sport where I think the education should come is whether you're a founder of a startup that has something to do with sports, or you're in photography, or you're in writing, or, you work for a brand. I think there are tons of jobs in sports, and I don't think they educate you that, okay, just because you can't play anymore doesn't mean that your knowledge and skill isn't beneficial as a coach or product development or in the media or something still around sports. And then you get that joy of still being connected to your favorite thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, and there's, you bring up the identity. I mean, everybody looks at it as like, okay, I'm done with the sport, and I'm Jennifer, the water skier, I'm Rob, the runner. It could be, Bill, the football player, whatever it might be. And there's a crisis with that. And I think with the education side of things, and we've talked about, putting together teams with resource partners and going into the university and saying, let's help you with additional curriculum in the financial space, in the health space, in the career services, in the, sales and marketing to help not only the current athletes, but the alumni athletes as well. Because I think a lot of the alumni athletes tend to get forgotten. So
I also think that now with NIL that you have college athletes with a ton of money that they are going to blow through because it's the first time they've had any money. And maybe they come from a family who doesn't have much education in buying properties or investing or having a savings account or whatever. So I think even more important today is having, education around financial well-being. I frankly think It's not just athletes. I think one of the most important classes that they should have in school is finance, how to apply for a mortgage and how to make a budget. And I think back in the day, they used to have home economics and people were taught, how to run a household, and they don't have that anymore. But I think that there should be education around financial well-being for everybody, but especially athletes that all of a sudden come into, a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I have another podcast called NIL for You, and it's all about like education in the NIL space, and that's a big thing. Like just that whole thing, like, hey, you need to set up an LLC. You're gonna have to pay taxes. You're building these relationships that could last after you're done with your sport because you're working with these sponsors and all that. So there's a lot to it. So it was actually a pretty good segue. Sometimes I talk about, sometimes I don't. But let's talk a little about name, image, likeness because I think with NIL today. You were at the beginning of Title IX. So give me your thoughts a little bit on NIL because it's been a big move in a positive way for female athletes now. I mean, you hear the Caitlin Clarks of the world, Olivia Dunn's and all that. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting that there's so much more of an equal opportunity. I was laughing the other day that there were some reports that, what the growth of women's basketball has been, in the last year. And I'm thinking, wow, I played in 1986. That's been a long time coming, but hey, better late than never.
Exactly.
But it is exciting. I don't know why now, but I think it's exciting. They're making a lot of money at a really young age. So again, I think educating around how to manage that money and, easy come, easy go. So I think that is another problem. They need to learn how to manage the stuff and not be taken advantage of. And it's cool to see, that women's athletes are also not just men are able to make a living. One of the problems I'm solving with this Compete project is that, I'm trying to democratize opportunity in sport because back in my day, women didn't have an equal opportunity. And then now, back then even they added women's basketball, but they got rid of men's golf to do it
Right.
because there's only so many fields, so many coaches, and so many dollars.
Sure.
So scholastic or organized sports in high school or college are limited to the ones that we know of, right?
Right.
So a sport like water skiing or skateboarding or climbing or, some of these niche things that are out there today don't have an opportunity to become scholastic sports. So one of the things we want to do with our app is create a digital way where you can connect and play in the niche sports
Right.
and get exposure for your athleticism so that you can also join in on this financial windfall of athletes, because NIL is affecting scholastic level athletes that are playing in sports that you see on ESPN. But what if you're not on ESPN? Now, in my day, we were on ESPN for like 20 years, but the sport of water skiing is no longer there. So the athletes that are fantastic today, they can't make a living because they have no television exposure and they're not scholastic. So there's no way to grow the sport that way either. So that's also one of the problems that we're solving for, with our project.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. Let's talk a little bit about alumni engagement. Obviously, Alumni Direct is something that's important to us. But when you were in school, was the athletic department bringing back athletes to work to kind of mentor with other athletes, and not in the sense of like I know they come back for the golf tournaments and homecoming and all that. But did you see any of that?
No, not really. I mean, only in the last few years has have I really had a strong push from Georgia Tech to reach back out to me and stuff. So I think it's not as much in the past as they have today, but I think it's the biggest resource for, as they say, it's who you know, right?
Yeah,
So
for
if
sure.
your family doesn't know anybody, then you should have a connection to either the players on your team or the sponsors who sponsored or were involved in your sport at the university level or the other people who graduated. And then people want to help people that they have some, natural affinity for. And I think that when you go to a university, you've with the alumni, you feel like a family, right? So they are going to be more motivated to help you. And I think I had a conversation with last week that I literally just connected with somebody from Georgia Tech who's going to try to help me with my project. I mean, these are the best people for me to work with.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's so important. And I encourage athletes and anybody really with just alumni want to help. And I think the schools need to. It's a two-way street. It makes the alumni needs to want to come back too. But I think they making an effort. I think if I talk about, I probably mentioned to you too. Like I was on a call with our athletic department where I went to school, and I was on with a Hall of Fame football player from the school and played 10 years in the NFL. And he's just like tapped me in. I'd love to mentor. And they said that they just don't do a really good job with that. Maybe it's just don't have the bandwidth. But I think alumni engagement is critical. And I think, all students should take advantage of it and try to seek out, just like you said, helping you in the business, because you just never know. I think alumni are willing to help each other out. So that's a good thing. So let's talk about, which kind of leads me to similar a little bit, but let's talk about networking and connecting and the importance of that, especially while you're still involved in your sport.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this applies to anybody, but specifically in sports, I mean, every single person that you meet is a connection for the future. They may someday, somebody on your team may eventually be Elon Musk, right? So you want to keep relationship with everybody that you meet along the way, whether it's a sponsor, a super fan. You just never know when you're going to need somebody, and it's much better to resource a database of 100 people you've met along the way. Now you're not going to remember everybody, but I think you need to think of it as I need to keep a connection with 40, 100 core people that I could call anytime. And my daughter's been really a good example of this. She just said, okay, I've got 40 people that I met along the way that she makes sure that she reaches out to, once a year to have a coffee meeting, just so that if she ever needed a job or needed something, that she had a relationship. Because I don't think it's not just about knowing somebody. I think you have to actually have people that are going to really help you or need to have a genuine affinity or relationship. So it's a little deeper than you have a database of 100 people. You have to work at the relationship part, which is understanding what they're doing, caring, maybe helping with them. So when you need help, they're ready to help you. So
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you said that because it's so true that it's all about relationships. I think I always talk about my approach is like paying it forward. Like when I'm talking to people, it's
yeah,
not, how are you going to help me, but what can I do to help you? And I think,
exactly what I was trying to say is that
yeah,
you gotta, if you think about, okay, this is my network, I'm going to, and my dad, I'm from West Virginia, a small town, and my dad used to say, you meet the same people on the way up as you meet on the way down, so be nice to all of them. And so I try to
it's
always be a super humble champion, and remember if somebody was asking me for an autograph or something at a time when I was like, this is super inconvenient, just stop what you're doing, pay attention. And I've literally had these little girls that have asked me for autographs, or men or whoever, and they'll remember 20 years later
right.
that I stopped, that I talked to them. And then what if you find out this person is some big business person that can help you, right? So
Oh yeah.
you didn't know when you stopped to be nice to somebody back at that point that you would ever see them again, or that you were leaving some positive influence on them, and that maybe you need them or they can help you at some later time.
Yeah. And I think it's also just, like while you're still in the sport, you're still relevant. And so like, I've talked to agents before that say, okay, well, yeah, their athletes are so like, you know, grind, grinding and just all about the sport, which I understand, but they didn't take the time to build those relationships. So when they're done, like, okay, where's my 6-figure job? Like, you don't have that, you
Yeah,
haven't built those
you're
connections.
I think for sure professional athletes, but I think now college athletes are being paid.
Yeah.
You're being paid by the university for your full scholarship, right? So even if you weren't making any sponsorship dollars, the school was paying you. So you're a
Right.
professional athlete. So you have, some responsibility to act like a professional, which is managing your money, being nice to people, helping promote the school. There's a lot more to it than just being a player. Like all of it matters, right?
Yeah.
You have to realize that you are a business. School is, we've proven that university, sports is business, and
Right.
you're a business executive in that. Now, one of the main things you have to do is play, but all of the other things around sport are equally as important.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's everybody's tip there, as Jennifer said, as I said, is just build those relationships and be open to it, and even back to high school, like you never know where your teammates, where their parents, or just meet people. And the one thing too, sometimes people get intimidated by networking, and they're like, well, I'm talking to somebody who's very successful, they've got a lot of money, like what can I do to help them? You just never know. I mean, maybe you're going to help one of their kids out, or that it's just I always bring up this story on various podcasts I probably have, but I remember in my sales career taking out to lunch one of my big customers, and I was with the CEO and the head of marketing who ultimately became the CEO. But when the check came, I paid the bill, and the CEO kind of looked at me funny because he was so used to everybody being like, "Oh, he's the big guy. He's got all the money. He's paying for everything," and that's what he was used to. And I think just the gesture, obviously he could afford it, but the gesture that I put out to just to pay for that lunch meant a lot.
Yeah,
So I think,
because you're saying to him, like, I value this conversation with you. I
yeah,
wasn't using you for something, or I didn't expect anything, right? So I think that you have to be nice to everybody and think of it as, what can I do for other people, and not, you know, you can't be expecting something in return, and that's how you get something in return.
yeah, yeah, you
And you
got
never
it.
know. Again, I mean, I literally have met people 20 years later that remember exactly what I said, exactly what I did, and that, spoke to them when they were 8 or something. And then all of a sudden they grow up and they're executives. And, all of a sudden there's an opportunity to engage again, but you just don't realize that you have that big an influence as an athlete. I mean, you meet millions of people, but when
Sure.
if they admire you for your sport or anything, you're maybe making a bigger influence on their mind, and they remember that moment they met you 20 years ago, where sometimes I'm like, oh, that zillion people, I may not recognize them, but
Right.
they remember everything I said. Right? So you just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So here comes the two fun questions for you. First one is, what advice would you give to, and this is in college, what advice would you give to freshman Jennifer? 10 words or less.
Oh, boy, that's a tough one. Um, a lot of what we've already talked about, realizing I was at that stage of it's about fun and partying and, playing sport and just not realizing all of it was important, and you don't realize that you need those alumni relationships until you graduated and you're in business or you're in sales or whatever it might be. Uh, you just don't realize it at that time. So it's basically the conversation that we're having. I would want to tell her, hey, everything is important. Start thinking of it that way.
There you go. I like it. Okay. And how about a
You don't
senior
really
jet?
you don't think of yourself as a business person at that point. You think of yourself as this kid that just escaped your parents and, you just there to have fun. And you don't realize that you've stepped into the business world. And even now with NIL, like you're even more so,
Right.
you don't know, how how all these relationships are going to potentially, if there's a sponsor that's sponsoring you, when you're a freshman athlete, that might be a job for you or a career or something. You don't realize that thing is connected to your future.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally agree. And then what about senior Jennifer? What advice to her?
Senior, don't be afraid to fail. I like if you literally. I've definitely failed in athleticism. You fail forward fast. And I feel like in entrepreneurship, I'm failing forward fast. But if I was afraid to miss the shot, I'd never take the shot, right? If I'm afraid to step out and try to create this startup, uh, I don't have any tech background, I'd miss the shot or I missed the opportunity, right? So, and you don't know anything unless you failed. So,
Yeah.
when you meet somebody who said that they've been bankrupt 3 times, they probably know a lot, right?
Right.
Because they stepped out and they failed, but I'm sure the second time they learned something from the first time, right?
Yeah.
So, just that failing is okay, and you can't make all the people love you all the time. And so a lot of time we don't do things because we're afraid of how we look. And especially with social media now, we're like
Yeah.
afraid to get haters and we're afraid to have, you just can't live your life in fear. If you come from a genuine place, God, it'll work out. God will protect
Yeah.
you. It'll work out. And, some people just aren't going to like you, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's
especially if you think about athletes where, they have a great, I'm sure some of the ones in the Olympics. Let's do Simone Biles, right? She had the
yeah.
spinnies or whatever, and she had to drop out, and she got tons of hate mail, right? And then like she could have made that make her want to go hide or channel it back into, I'm not done yet. I'm going to leave on my terms. I'm going to come back and
Yeah.
try it again, right? It's just what are you going to do with it? You're going
Yeah.
to fail.
Right.
People are going to be negative, but what are you going to do with it? And
Yeah.
so just realize that's just how life is, but don't let it affect you. You have to, I think, self-worth and believing in yourself, and that failure doesn't mean a thing. It just means that you're getting smarter by the minute.
You got it. All righty. So now let's talk transition. So you've had a couple transitions. I mean, played basketball your whole life and did the water skiing as well, but you made a choice when you finished playing basketball. So talk about that transition out of that, and then we'll do a follow up on just the transition ultimately out of sport.
Yeah. So the first transition was that I water skied my whole life. I was a multi-time national champion, and then I got a full basketball scholarship. And at that time, the scholarships to play basketball for women's basketball were greater than volleyball, even at that time. And certainly that was my way to get my education uh, paid. So it made sense to play basketball. And during the 3 years that I played at Georgia Tech, they started there had been some professional level water skiing, but it wasn't televised. So all of a sudden it was on ESPN. I broke a world record. I signed some pro contracts, and all of a sudden there was this opportunity to have a future that was beyond university, potentially being a professional athlete in a sport on television, for a lifetime, however long that lasted, which was at least 20 years. So I chose to leave Georgia Tech and not play my senior year. So I felt like at the time I didn't want to give up the opportunity that I had coming forward. As the older Jennifer, I would be like, yeah, maybe you should have played that one more year there. I think I would have had better relationships with my alumni players because I didn't leave them my senior year, and with the university itself. My degree, I did all the hard work to go to Georgia Tech, but I got my degree from University of Central Florida in the end. But my older self would say, be patient. And I think this applies to athletes that go pro too soon. Just enjoy that experience because you have a lifetime to be the other thing. So I gave up 1 year, but I felt like, yeah, going back, maybe I should have, hung in there one more year. But I did move on to become a professional level water skier and do it. I'm still water skiing today. So I did make a good decision about what career path. I just think I could have been a little more patient.
And then what about like once even though you still water ski today, like what your transition out of like, are you still professional water skiing today, or just more of like?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm still qualified. I'm like one of the oldest pros that can show up at a pro event. I don't really make too much money doing it anymore, but they do have a senior level, like senior tour
Okay.
and things like that now. So a lot of the pro athletes, they get all the way to the pinnacle of the sport, multi-time world champion or whatever it is, and then they retire. And then they disconnect from the sport altogether. Like we rarely see them, and I think that they are literally left with a hole in their life because if you've done this thing your whole life, it's really hard to not be that thing anymore. So I was my husband and I both are one of the athletes that stayed on and continued to compete, even though we weren't as good as we used to be, which is kind of like riding the wave down the hill, the ball down the hill, the other side. So you got to
Right.
check your ego at the door. But we've been able to be massive influencers in sport, coaching other athletes, influencing the direction of the sport because we stayed in the sport.
That's great.
And I guess every athlete has to choose. It is emotionally difficult to not be as good as you used to be. But if I look back at the impact that I've had on the people, the sport, products I've invented, what I'm doing now, I'm hoping I've changed the trajectory of the sport by
Right.
staying in as a business person, still doing the sport as an athlete, but not making my living as a professional athlete, but coaching
Right.
and designing products and, staying in.
Right. No, that's great. I mean, I guess you see that too with like some of the athletes that get into like broadcasting, like
Yeah.
or even just into coaching, that kind of
I
thing
think
as well.
from an athlete perspective, I think that there's an identity called athlete. And like if
Yeah.
you played high school and you didn't play college, you have a hole in your life. Like you still think of yourself as as an athlete. Like I played
Right.
high school basketball, but I didn't make college. Or you played college, but you didn't play pro. Or you played pro, but you aged out or you injured out, and you are left with an emotional hole. We've had a lot of suicide, people who drop
Yeah.
out and just don't ever do it again. Like one, I think they're less healthy because you give up being
Right.
active, but they emotionally are just left with a giant hole. So one of the things that we think we'll be solving with this Compete project is a way to digitally connect players, no matter what age they are, and give them a way to reconnect with the alumni and compete in a digital sports world and continue to be athlete, even if it's not in the way that organized high school or organized university or organized pro. That we are creating an entirely new way that people can stay in and still be athlete. Because I think athlete is a type of person. You know how to be on a
Right.
team. You know how to work towards a goal. Self-discipline. Uh, so I think that athlete is a cool type of person, and that I think once you're one, you're always one.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean that fits. That's the same. With other athletes, and it's all sports. I mean, there's that athlete skill set. There's the DNA of an athlete,
Yeah,
and it's great. We've talked about it offline, but just when you see these athletes coming together, it doesn't really matter what sport, but there's that just a common thread in them. So when you look at like from a business perspective, everybody's doing that. So let's before we you kind of you're whetting our appetite. We're excited to hear about Compete, but before we do talk, give just several words of advice to athletes as they do get ready to transition out of sport, regardless of what level they attain.
well, as I think your platform comes right into play because you got to stay connected to the people you've met along the way, and people from your university, your teammates, those are going to be the front line of that, for you. If you got to filter the world down to a few people that are your major influence in your life, start there, because the world is big, right? So if we start with the commonality of a university, you're already ahead of the game. People who have something in common are more likely to enjoy his company, have something to talk about, and want to help each other.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, so like on your journey in entrepreneurship, I think that as a professional water skier, I've talked to some other people in sports similar. You were basically like an entrepreneur too. I mean, you were this athlete, but you're an entrepreneur too, because didn't you have to go out and like find sponsors and things like that? I mean, ultimately, I guess with your success, it came to you, but like at least initially starting out.
Yeah, I mean, in sport, for example, being sponsored by a brand and helping them design boats or skis or swimwear. So I was already involved in entrepreneurship, helping those brands, and then representing them at boat shows and out in the public, to designing specific products for the sport, being on the board of directors for the sport. I formed the first ever women's water sports tour, did television shows on that sport. So, my water skiing, just as the opportunity or the problem arose, I was able to step in and fill it or
Right.
solve it. Right. Kind of lost where we're going with that, but I just feel like there were so many different ways: having a retail store, running events, being on the board of directors, inventing products, running television shows, running the pro tour, working with sponsors. I mean, that's just some and that I got to do as a professional water skier. And maybe even in the small sports, you have even a bigger opportunity because you need to supplement your income. You're not going to make $1 million
Right.
water skiing. So, having multiple sponsors and multiple business revenue streams and turning, your celebrity into training center or
Right.
retail store is important.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, all right, so let's talk compete. So, we've throughout the podcast we've kind of put some stuff we've interwoven them into it. Now we're gonna hear more about compete and what you're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty old for an entrepreneur. I had the idea for like 20 years. I'm going to give the example in water skiing specifically that we used to be televised, but now we're not, and so the sport is a little bit in decline because nobody knows we exist. Are we ever going to get back on ESPN primetime? Probably not. So we need a way to get exposure so people still want to be like us and do what we do. So that's one problem that I was experiencing in the sport. And what other thing I've realized along the way when I was marketing the women's water sports tour is, water sports or women's water sport is so niche that we needed to network together to have any market power. Like if you wanted to buy a good television slot, women's water skiers were never going to get a good slot. But if I put 5 women's water sports together, we had market power. So I was
Right.
very clear that the smaller niche type sports definitely need to network together to have any market power. And I wanted to grow my sport by creating an easy way to measure, compare, and compete. So my original idea was to put something in everybody's boat. I mean, I think most people have been on a boat with Uncle Joe, got on a wakeboard, a kneeboard, or a water ski, or maybe they learned at camp. And that's the end of it. They thought it was super cool, but then they just didn't know there was anything else or how to get there. So I wanted to create a way that people could digitally or connect with something in their boat. And it dawned on me the smartphone was the way to record your water skiing and get a score and compete with anyone in the world. And if we're going to build such a virtual competition tool, it makes sense to build it for 1,200 sports and not just for one sport, right? And so that is basically the idea of Compete. It's to create a platform to use all the state-of-the-art technology, starting with a smartphone and video, to be able to compete in sports. We could have high school teams, college teams. It allows you to reconnect with friends around the world or your alumni and play on an alumni golf team, but doing it digitally. Combining with that augmented reality, combining with that AI. So we're already working on AI scoring so that you can get an actual official score through the app. And that lends itself then to coaching. But I think it's important that somebody builds this digital platform to compete in sports, and that it is a network that all athletes and all sports can use. I think it's very important to democratize opportunity. Right now, the sports that are scholastic probably don't need this, but if you're not a scholastic sport, you need this. If you're on ESPN, I think they have 28 sports that they cover, and during the Olympics, like another 50. So that's like 70 sports, let's say, that have major television coverage from time to time. But my list of sports is 1,400 that are in this app. So that means there's a whole bunch of people that don't have opportunity. And one of the things we hope to do is create ways where athletes, especially the elite influencer athletes, can make a living in this platform, helping other people with their sport and affording to, be an athlete, right? It's expensive to be an athlete. So
Sure.
we're trying to create a way that every athlete can compete, even if you live in a remote place in a third world country. Maybe you could, compete in digital soccer, doing soccer skills, or you can be discovered, or you could be an AAU athlete that's really good, and you could turn the coaching app on and coach on a Friday and make enough money to pay for your AAU trip. So we want to make an opportunity for, every athlete, not just the ones that are on ESPN, to be able to afford their sports career. And, by networking all these people together, you're just creating something much more powerful.
That's great. And so, is the app's in beginning phases, or where are we at as far as when people ultimately, when can we start using it, do you think?
Yeah, so we are hoping for a launch in the spring.
Okay.
We will have 1,400 at least sports that we have on the list so far that will be available. We'll probably focus our marketing outreach to water sports first, but anybody can participate in the app. The MVP is hopefully going to be out for beta testing in the next 90 days, with a big launch to the App Store and the public by spring. And I did get an opportunity to be part of the UCF incubator, again, leveraging alumni relationships to,
Sure.
help get the product off the ground.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I can't wait to see. And what's we're not going to go through all the sports, but it kind of blew my mind there. 1,400 sports. I mean, I think if you ask the common person like how many sports are out there, they probably, at a high end, I think somebody might say like 20 or 30. So like it's
Yeah,
crazy.
I mean, I started putting the list together, like it's a crazy number, and they're inventing new sports literally all the time. I've had people contact me, and I just invented this new way of doing whatever. I mean, pickleball is a new sport, and I think
Right.
I'd like to use pickleball as an example, because I think pickleball is the reinvention of an old way of playing. Right?
Right.
It's like tennis easy, but
Right.
what's happened is a lot more people are engaging in sport because they made a simple, easy way to play. So I think
Yeah.
I'm doing that. I'm creating a simple, easy way to play any sport. So we're not limited by budget. We're not limited by location. We're not limited
Right.
by time. That anybody can play. So new ways of playing will happen. I envision that we'll have digital teams of athletes that are multi-sport. So you might have a board sport team where there's a skateboarder, snowboarder, a wakeboarder on the same team competing against another digital team like them. So I feel like we're recreating how people can play sports because we're eliminating time and location. And so all new ways of playing sports will come out of it, and all
Right.
new relationships. And because we're bringing skydiving together with water skiing, together with American football, I think it gives an opportunity to make that network we were talking, the sport
Yeah.
network effect, even greater. Because if you're on a digital team with athletes that play a different sport, all of a sudden your network is not just people who water ski, but your network is now people who snow ski and snowboard, right? So it's going to grow your sphere of influence and who you know in sport by the cool things that you can do when it's digital, when you don't have to be in the same field at the same time, same place.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's a great way to build that community. So how can people find you?
Right now, the best thing is to go to our website and just sign up to get more information. It's actually called Be Play Fuel. So we think the app is going to be play fuel for people. The problem that we're solving is sports across the board are declining. So we think that this app will be the fuel to make people want to go out and be active and play. According to the Outdoor Sports, I think it's Outdoor Sports Federation, is the number one reason people are not active. They have no one to play with.
Yeah.
Right. So this gives you a way to digitally connect with 5 other women, and you're each walking in your own neighborhood, but you're now on a team. Right. And so we feel like we'll give everybody somebody to play with. And then there's that opportunity to inspire and influence and teach through the product. Right. And inspiring that other gal, hey, you need to go walk today because it impacts me. Right. So now we don't even know each other, but we've digitally connected, and now your walking and your health is important to me. So I think that we can leverage the social part of it to get more people playing anything, whether it's yoga, planks in your living room. So I say sport, but it's really active. Anything could be billiards or any kind of active, play.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Well, this has been great. You can find us at alumnidirect.com, and the podcast is on both our YouTube channel for Alumni Direct, as well as you go to all the different podcast networks. And every week, you get such great information, such great nuggets. I always call it. Jennifer gave some great ones in the other athletes as well. So we encourage people to watch and listen, because I think it's so important. I mean, I always say want to impact at least one person, but hopefully a lot more than that. So thank you again, Jennifer. This has been great, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.